So hi everybody and welcome to another video. So with myself, Rob Bradstock, hope you're enjoying them. Today we're talking about connecting with the higher self, and it's one of, I would say, the most important subjects that we can cover. It has some of the most benefits, and we're going to get into that, how it works. So the menu for today in today's YouTube restaurant is going to talk about how we started connecting with our own broader self. Okay. Then we're going to look at the context of what it is and what it isn't and that type of thing. We're going to look at the benefits to you of doing it, because the benefits are amazing, and then also some practical things how to get started. So in YouTube speak, most of the people that watch the videos don't subscribe at the minute, so if you could subscribe, it's great for us to be able to share this content. If not, if you could just hit like on the video, that would be really, really useful for us. It helps share these ideas out, and apparently YouTube loves it when people like the video for their algorithm, so I'm told. So anyway, if you can do that, that's great. So yeah, so how are you, Rob? Welcome to another fireside chat.
Very good. The snow has gone and the sun is out today. So generally feeling that spring might possibly happen.
Yes.
Which is very important at the moment, to have something to look forward to.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yep.
Good.
Excellent. Okay, so let's talk about the broader self. Let's talk about our own experience of it first, I think. So how did you get started, I suppose, connecting with that part of yourself before we talk about what it actually is? And then I'll join after you. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, the broader self, it's interesting really, because reading Seth, he always says that there's no real divisions between the self, which I think is very important, not to kind of get into this place where somehow you feel that you're either lesser or different or whatever. That it's really, we are an aspect of our larger self, soul or entity, and the inner self is the bit that's sort of the most close to us, and the broader self is a little bit further away, but really they're all part of the same thing. So how I originally, I suppose when I read the Seth books, which, you know, I keep on coming back to, because to me they are the ultimate in my understanding of how everything works and what our place is in it. You know, he talks about how, particularly within the society we live in today, how disconnected we are, how the rational self, which is the everyday self, is working on its own. And when he talked about that, he said that there's a magical self or an inner self, lots of different terminology, but I think it's basically all the same thing. I get a bit confused about it sometimes. But it's when you start to connect with that inner part of your being, you're more complete, and your journey through physical reality, through your life, becomes just so much more easy. It's like you're not having to do it all on your own, which is what the everyday self, ego, personality thinks, that often that it has to do it all on its own, and it's not equipped to do that. It's not even supposed to do that. So that's how I originally heard about the inner self, and then how to connect with it. That was the next bit. But what about you, David?
Yeah. I mean, I think the main thing about it is, as you said, there's no hierarchy. It's not that there's a higher self and a lower self and all that kind of stuff. So we'll get into that after this, but that's really important. And yes, you're absolutely right. You do not feel alone. You feel innately connected to yourself and to reality in totally different ways. So my experience was, I mean, as a child, I think, you know, I mentioned before, I had out of body experiences when I was about 3, and from that point, I always knew that I was being taught in dreams and that type of thing. I didn't have a name for this person, but I distinctly remember different things. And then one day I was exploring past lives and that type of thing, and I felt, as I was relaxing, there was somebody else there, and I felt as though my energy, my personality, me, kind of moved to one side, and that this other personality came through. And there's lots of detail in that I won't go into today, but it was strange enough. It lasted for a few hours, and the person I was with asked a whole bunch of questions that I wouldn't have knowledge of. And this personality that introduced himself as Aaron came through and started to talk. And that was my introduction to, and the good thing is that I had, because I was aware of who this person was to some other degree, I was always had a very interesting relationship with him as a teacher, that I wasn't worried. I always felt very safe. So I was kind of back somewhere. It felt like I was back somewhere else, and Aaron was talking, name my broader self. And that was 25 years ago, something like that now, from that point. And so yeah, so he's my longest friend. Isn't that nice? My most reliable as well. So yeah, so I've been, and then so from there, so that's my introduction to what I would call my broader self. That he named himself as Aaron, two other people before he arrived, and the experiences were all very strange and odd, but strangely reassuring at the same time. So since then, I've always had a much stronger, as you say, a connection where I don't feel isolated. I don't feel as though my intellect has to solve all the problems, and I definitely feel more connected to myself. So that's my introduction. But you, I mean, your broader self, we'll call Sirius.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so I've met Sirius, everybody.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
we've done some channeling sessions, very interesting. So how did you start that?
Oh, well, I mean, basically what happened was that it was an interesting progression, really, because I started reading the Seth material. I had a physical ailment, which carpal tunnel syndrome, which is a horrible sort of nerve problem. And I basically felt that the sort of regular medical profession could only help me to a certain degree. And I was talking to my sister-in-law, who I mentioned before, who we did the Seth talks with. And she said, "Oh, I know this this healer. Maybe she could help you." So I went to see her, and because of talking to her, and she helped me enormously and opened up just parts of the world that I had no idea about, the inner world I had no idea about. And I realized that I actually could help people as well. I had already came from quite a psychic family. I'd done water divining and various other things like that. So I was already aware that the scientific view was somewhat limited. And I, from this healing work that I did, I got introduced to a woman who did some channeling, a very, very wonderful woman who I've been friends with for most of my adult life now, a woman called Sheila Reynolds, who lives in Philadelphia. And we started doing, I went to her for a channeled reading, and she channeled her own guide, or broader self, whatever you like to call it. And in this reading, she basically said to me, "You can receive energy from your mother." My mother had died when I was very young. You can probably receive written information from your grandfather. And so I started to do experiment with sort of automatic writing, basically. I would go into a very light trance, sit down in front of a computer or with a notebook and just write down whatever came to me. And I did that for some time. And then eventually, when I was writing this down, my grandfather, his energy, his essence, sort of said to me, there is another entity, I suppose. The terminology is strange sometimes, but there's another part of yourself, a more not so focused in physical reality. He actually is only incarnated 3 times, so it's more in a sort of a non-physical place, who would be very willing to give you information. So I thought, well, great, and he decided to call me Simon. which he referred to as my entity name, which is what Seth talks about, which is our broader name. And he said that his name was Sirius, which I particularly liked. And I felt like he said that because I love the stars, and Sirius is a particularly bright star in the sky. And it just felt like, yeah, this is a kind of a lovely name. So I started writing information from him initially. And then eventually I realized, as with what happened with Jane Roberts, that the writing was very cumbersome and tedious in a way, and that I could actually verbalize what the information that was being given to me. So that's what I started to do. I started to verbalize it, and he came through in a very gentle way. I was conscious. A lot of people who have done channeling work tend to step aside completely and are unconscious, or in the past, but I chose, in a way, to be more present with the whole thing, and it began a long relationship of first of all giving readings for myself, for my wife, for my closer friends, and then later on, various other people would come to me, and he would give information, and I would sort of, it's a bit dreamlike. I couldn't quite remember exactly what was said, but I mean, people would say, God, that was so accurate, it was so beneficial, and I felt like, well, this is a wonderful thing. It's helping me, it's helping other people. I think I'm going to keep doing it. And that developed into also having assistance from him and I say him, but it's not really male or female, when I was doing healing work as well. So it's, the whole thing expanded. And I always felt, like you were saying, David, that, that I had someone I could go to if I needed a bit of guidance or a bit of perspective on what was going on in my life. Yeah, so that's not a very succinct explanation.
Well, it's pretty succinct. It's pretty succinct, yeah. I mean, I think it develops for people in different ways, doesn't it? I mean,
yes.
That's, I mean, before I did any verbal channeling, before Aaron came through, those 20 years ago, I had a very conscious relationship with him from the age of 3. He was always there somewhere where I was having very strange spiritual experiences when I was a kid, and through all the healing. So, he was an ever presence. So I, developed that trust, if you like. So, yeah. And as you say, it's a dreamlike experience if one is speaking. So although we wouldn't identify ourselves as our broader selves, I mean, you're Rob, I'm Dave, that type of thing. It's that it gives you access to much more information. I mean, I think that's the key to it. As you were saying, it's somewhere to go when you want an answer. And of course, that part of us is not limited by time nor space. And we'll get into the benefits a little bit later. But that's one of them, isn't it? It's that they have it's like a helicopter view. I would describe it as, so if we're in a traffic jam and we're not moving, they're able to they have a helicopter view of what's going on and can guide us, so.
And it's a great benevolent feeling. It's not like, it's not like being taken over by anything, or it's not like there's it's a very, very mutual, cooperative, beneficial experience. And I think that's very important for people to understand, that you're not really doing anything that isn't your natural way of being anyhow. I mean, I've been doing it so long now, it seems completely normal. But I remember when I first started, there was a certain amount of hesitancy and a certain amount of nervousness about, but then I realized as the information came through, it was so loving and compassionate and helpful that any fears I had about it just dissolved, basically. And I just really wanted, to get a clearer and better connection with that part of myself. And, I just really wanted to help myself and also, help other people as well with it, if the information. But I would always say to people, this knowledge that you're hearing when he speaks is knowledge that you have access to yourself, It's just being, you know, nicely sort of wrapped up and given to you in another way. And of course it makes sense to you because it's the information that's within your inner self as well. It's just, you know, it's very nice to have it outside being given to you, you know. It's so that's an important
Yeah,
aspect.
it is a really that is really important, because I think if people get a bit worried about, you know, getting lost, getting taken over, and and this is and all that is nonsense, by the way, dear
Absolutely.
viewer. All that is nonsense, and we can cover some myth busting in another video. You know, but all that's nonsense. You're quite safe, and as Rob was saying, and that's absolutely true. It feels like the most natural thing in the world to experience. It's not normal, you know, within our in our environment, but it is natural, and it is the most natural, loving, interesting experience one can have. So so yeah, so don't be afraid of, don't believe the myths and all the hype that you need to protect yourself and all these types of things. You know, that is a stuff of nonsense. It's a bit like I mean, if I was going to go to Cuba, for example, which I've never been. Have you been to Cuba, Rob?
No, I haven't. I've been close, but not
Okay, all right.
no cigar. Close, but
All
no
right.
cigar.
Yes, but no cigar. Yeah, you know, if somebody would say, don't go to Cuba, it's terrible. You've got to take a gun with you and protect yourself and all this kind of stuff. You know, but they've never been to Cuba. You know, you wouldn't believe them, and this is exactly the same. You know, there's nothing to worry about. There's nothing to be concerned about. It's the most natural, interesting experience, and in fact, it's extremely healthy to do. There are benefits across the board, which we can talk about. So don't be afraid of it. Embrace it and explore it, and you will thank yourself without a doubt. You know, so if we just have a talk about this idea of what the inner self is in simplistic terms, I think that'd be really useful. So there's lots of different names for it. I think Rob, you mentioned you know, entity, personality, you know, but so it's I think of it as awareized energy. You know, it's energy, it's a personality, it has its own borders, but they are also interconnected with other portions of ourselves. So you could call it soul, you could call it consciousness, you know, but I think the important thing is that I like the term gestalt, which you may or may not have heard of, which is that it's part of something else. So like my finger is part of the gestalt of my body, and we are part of the gestalt of our broader self, of our soul, and that these other portions we're talking about are simply other portions of that gestalt, generally with more information, I suppose. You know, what would you say? How would you frame it?
Yes, I mean, I think that's a very good way to put it. I mean, I just also wanted to say that the way in which you can connect with your inner self, your broader self, may not be in such a obviously sort of personality type way. It could easily be through, and almost definitely through, creative endeavors. For example, through playing music, through writing, through art. And I've talked to people who, you know, feel, and I also play music as well. So I mean, I know what it is that you're playing music, and with other people quite often, and suddenly there is a point where the whole thing takes on another dimension, where you suddenly feel this expansion of energy, and you're playing, but you're not even thinking about what you're doing. A bit like what I was talking about last week about the juggling. It's whenever you are involved in something that is uniquely creative and expressive, that part of yourself has a great opportunity to kind of make itself felt. So it's not necessarily so personalized. It can be a bit more nebulous, but equally as valid. And I just wanted to mention that, because not everyone is going to want to channel verbally, or And I mean, it can come through writing. I've seen it a lot.
Yeah.
People will write stuff and they will kind of go, where the hell did
that come from? Yeah. Yeah. But I think that's really, I mean, for me personally, I play the guitar a little bit, but not to a level where I feel in flow. Okay, not at that level. But for me, then actually, I've written a book with Aaron where he wrote, I thought, I sensed as though, there's information coming here. And I do it through writing, and through the verbal stuff. But I came up with a whole bunch of questions. And the premise was that, what's it like to live as a conscious creator from the human's perspective, quite challenging sometimes, and from the broader self perspective, which is different. They have a different perspective. And so one half of the book is him and one half of the book is me. And actually it was that idea of, hey, where is, with him in particular, I call him him, information that I hadn't been introduced to yet, and I got into that flow with writing. And I've kind of taught myself to type on the computer while holding that connection, if you like, and I found that really useful. So automatic typing rather than automatic write. I find I'm terrible at writing. My writing's awful. If you see my notebook, you see how terrible it is. But automatic typing, I think I can, I kind of got hold of that a little bit. So yeah, so I suppose it's now some ideas on how other people can get involved, which we kind of touched on. But what would your thoughts be on how people can begin to connect with, and I use the term connect loosely, and it's maybe not a very good term, how maybe they could become aware of this different aspect of themselves, because of course they're innately connected, because it is who we are. We're part of that gestalt, if you like. So I suppose it's how can people become more aware of that part and then begin to express it and bring it more into their life.
People can get started in lots of different ways, but the main thing I think is to start actually having the intention to make a connection outside of your everyday self. And this can be done by going into relaxation, going into what we talked about before, psychological time, perhaps posing a question, and allowing yourself, with perhaps keeping a notebook with you. I found that quite useful. Keep a notebook, get very relaxed, and pose a question, something that you would like clarity on in your life, and then see if you can hear something. See if you can hear an answer. Now, it might sound very similar to what you might say, but just go with it and just see, when you write it down, whether something comes up, and just practice. And to begin with, when I first started doing this work, it took me quite a long time to get the connection nice and flowing, because I had to kind of adjust my level of energy with my broader self, with Sirius. There was a little sort of adjustments that seemed to need to happen. So you need to be quite patient with it, and listen yet again to these intuitions and hunches, and write them down, because you may be getting, well, not maybe, you are getting guidance, whether you're aware of it or not, throughout your day. Your inner self is wanting to communicate with you. And if the everyday self, if your personality can just stop a moment and just allow this information to come through more consciously, you'll find that you'll get more and more of this information. You'll also find, like, for example, you might ask a question, like you want something explained, or and you might find that suddenly you go into a bookshop and a book falls out in front of you, or you might be walking down the street and you might look up at an advert or something, a billboard, and it says something, and you think, wow, God, that's incredible. That's very much like what the question I asked, or it might have the name of somebody in it. So my friend in Philadelphia refers to this as street mail. She says, look out for street mail. And It's the way that your inner self, your broader self, can communicate with you when you're not in direct communication. It could be a chance conversation. It could be something that you listen to on the radio, or you know, you're watching a series on Netflix or something, and somebody says something, and it's like, whoa, that is absolutely exactly what I was. And so it can come. The information can come to you in many different ways, but it's because you're opening up to this larger aspect of yourself. So there are other ways as well, but that's all I can think of at the moment.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Yeah, I mean, I'll go through them to clarify. So, dreams is another one I would mention.
Yes.
So
Dreams.
often, because that broader part of oneself is available in dreams, because obviously you're not focused in physical reality, then dreams is another one. But yeah, so intuition, you know, notice your hunches, you say, keep the notebook. Automatic writing, write down stuff or type down stuff if you can hold that. I would just also say that the idea of listening is can be quite challenging. So I just think about that you've got two types of senses. So you've got the first type of senses, which are your five senses here, and they show you a world based on your five senses. But you've also got counterparts of those in inner reality, if you like, and they're the ones that you're essentially going to be using. So Rob, I think when you said you were tuning in, a bit like a radio trying to tune into a frequency or a message, if you like, and the knobs on the radio are your inner senses and the inner senses of the broader self, trying to tune into those. So you're going to be using different senses. You use them all the time, you're just not maybe aware of them, you know. So that's what's going on there. Another one I'd say is painting is also pretty good. I know Claire, my partner, does sometimes just lets herself relax and paint and feels, you know, in tune with that type of thing. I'm terrible at painting, so that wouldn't be me at all. But another one I like is just is daydreaming.
Mm-hmm.
You might call it, where I will pose a question or just say, okay, you know, what's going on right now, and allow myself to daydream, my mind to wander, if you like. And again, what happens then for me is that I tend to catch on to ideas internally. I go, oh yeah, I didn't think of it like that. That happens a lot, you know, and I think that's what happens when people are in the shower or when they're out for walks. Do you know what I mean? They're not focused on the five senses so much, so the inner self can begin to answer. But I love the term street. What do you call it? Street mail.
Street mail. Awesome. Yeah. It was
exactly. I mean, I had an example of that with where I posed a question about my children. It was my birthday the other day, and posed a question about my children, my two daughters. I've got two daughters and a son, and about them communicating with me on my birthday. All good, no problem at all. And about halfway through the day, I was walking along, and there was a lady with two children, two girls, which made me feel quite nostalgic, you know, because these two girls were, you know, similar ages, like my daughter at the age of 3 and 4, or whatever it is. And one of the young girls, so I was posing the idea, I wonder when they're going to come and talk to me, you know, wonder when we're going to have our phone call on my birthday. And one of the young girls turned and looked at me pointedly, you know, and I looked at her, you know, and I thought, oh, she's holding, my internal thought was she's holding my gaze quite firm, you know. It's a very different thing. And she said, you know, I love you, Daddy, don't you? And the mother didn't react. The child just turned away and walked off. And I just thought, you know, 2 seconds earlier, I was thinking about my daughters and that. So that's verbal street mail. I love that.
Absolutely. That's a very, very good example of it. I mean, I think it's so wonderful because it just gives you that slight feeling or you know, that well, something's quite strange here, but in a lovely way. You just feel, yeah. Oh, okay, now I understand. I think often there's a sort of those aha moments. It's like I kind of didn't know what to do, but I got a phone call suddenly out of the blue, or it's that kind of thing. It's what makes reality have a kind of magical quality to it. And
there's a sense of wonder for me personally, and magic, where you get things maybe not as direct as that, but you are thinking of. I mean, I even had it on Netflix the other night. I was thinking about the magical approach, and immediately, and what came up was a series on Netflix that I never would have bothered watching. I'd looked at it a few times and thought no, and I just felt very strongly as though I wanted to watch this, and it really hit the mark. It made quite an impression on me, and changed how I think about a couple of things. So the inner self is extremely active, you know, and listening, connected to all of our reality, and is there to help, and that has a kind of wondrous quality to it, which is why I think one gets to the idea that you don't have to worry so much. You know, you're supported. You know, you are held in a state of grace and loving support. And there is a phrase, I think it's in the Seth material, but I'm not sure. It came up. I think it might be in one of Jane Roberts' books, where he says, you know, you can lean into the universe. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's a really nice little way to go. You know, I can lean into you. I'm okay. My family's okay. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be okay. And I think that, as well as the direct experiences of automatic writing or channeling or whatever, will transform one's life. Yeah. Yes,
and you just feel more whole and complete because of it.
Yes.
And you know that you'll know when you're getting information like that, because as you say, there'll be this wonder and you'll feel good. And it's, you just, there's no doubt in your mind that, and it could be something very, very small, but I think it's really good when you're starting off with this stuff, just to entertain the possibility that communication from your broader self can come in a many, many different ways, and just to be on the lookout. I wanted to tell you one other story as well. And I'm not sure if I've told this before, but if I'm repeating myself, excuse me. My wife and I were in the Himalayas, and we were trekking for about 9 weeks.
Oh, sorry, Rob. My stories end up around the corner down the road, and all your stories ends up in. I was walking in the Himalayas with my wife. Anyway,
maybe I have told this before.
No, you haven't. I just thought it was. It can happen anywhere, can't it? Round the corner in Hitchin or in the Himalayas, you know.
It's... Oh, yeah, I know. I'm sorry. It's just
no, it's good.
I like the spectacular parts of the book. But anyhow, we are lost. Basically, we are lost,
right.
And we are trying to find a path to get over into this next valley that we need to get to, and we don't want to return because it's actually we've come across. Yeah, it was a very, very difficult place to get to, and we were told that this pass was at the end of the valley. We get up there. There is not the slightest sign of any pass whatsoever. We decide to spend the night in this cave, and it's absolutely freezing. And during the night, I kind of asked my inner self, look, I really need a sign to show us where this pass is, because we're basically stuck. And I thought, okay, you know, I went to sleep, got up in the morning. We're ready to head off, and I'm thinking, like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then suddenly, out of the blue, this eagle appears. I mean, this is really true. This eagle appears. It starts flying, and it catches our attention. It starts flying back and forth, back and forth. And okay, I've seen it now. And then it sort of circles, and then it heads off, and it flies up this bit of the mountain that we hadn't even looked at before. And I was thinking, God, I wonder if that is the path. And then about 15 minutes later, we start to see some of these nomadic shepherds coming over this path. And they're really far away, and we could easily have missed them. And I realized, obviously, that is the path. And it was just like, it felt like magical. But I mean, it was so incredible. And I really do believe that, you know, the universe manifested that eagle to show us where to go next.
Yeah. I mean, there was that film, wasn't there, called Practical Magic, and I think this is kind of what it is, isn't it? I mean, that's dramatic magic, you know, eagles and Himalayas and all that. But I just think it is. I love the fact that it can be playful, interactive, interesting, optimistic, reassuring, and also just such a natural progression from moving from, you know, that this is who I am, this is the ego, you know, my 5 sense world is it, because that's a pretty struggling place to be. I would never want to go back there, ever. You couldn't pay me £1 million to go back there. I think once one connects with one's broader self and one sees the layers of possibilities that are open, you know, loving possibilities, you know, fun, interesting, dramatic, life-changing, life-saving, maybe in your case, experiences, it gives one such confidence in oneself and also reality, you know, that there's something really good going on here and something really communicative, and I'm supported in that, you know, and I think that's for me, that's just you know, I'm just saying it, thinking, feeling it at the same time, going, yeah, that's exactly how it is for me, you know. So brilliant. So we'll round off, I think. So anything you want to add as we finish off on this video?
No, I just want to, I suppose, reiterate this thing about if it feels good, follow that, you know, and that is the thing. If the information, if the sensation is a sense of expansion and feeling good, that's something that you can really trust, and you know, work on developing whatever aspect of or means of communication that seems to be appropriate to you to communicate with your broader self. And there may be other ways that we haven't even, you know, thought of. But you know, there is a sense of inner knowing that starts to happen. It may only happen once in a blue moon to begin with, but I found for myself that once I opened my ideas up to this, and once I'd read the Seth material, and once I'd met these various people, that a sort of progression seemed to happen, and there was a momentum starts to happen, and just enjoy opening up to new ideas and new perceptions. Yeah,
excellent. I think that's a really good way, and I just reiterate finally that the more you do, the more confidence you'll have, the more the experiences will get more real, for want of a better phrase. They'll seem more concrete for you, and then, you know, then I think the 5 sense world makes more sense, you know, and the 5 senses, yes, and the 5 senses and the inner senses then begin to work very much in tandem, much more consciously. So you're able to, you're able to look at things you want to create using both types of senses, and with that inner guidance. And of course, that's a new, as they say, that's a new paradigm of how to operate in the world, you know, that really is. So brilliant. Okay, so I think we've covered a lot there. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. Please hit the like button, subscribe if you want some more. That's going to be really helpful to share this hopefully really positive message out there as well. So I was going to do that Ronnie Corbett, you know, it's goodbye from me and it's goodbye from him, which you watching might not run, so I won't do that. But anyway, goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me, and thanks very much for watching.
Yeah.
And if you've got any questions, you can always pose some questions, which we will endeavour to answer. And the main thing is have fun with it all. Yeah. You know, it's about enjoying yourself and expansion, and you know, don't take it all too seriously, because even though my guide, broader self, or whatever you like to call it, it refers to himself as Sirius, in America, the difference between pronouncing the word serious, there is no difference. So I ended up with a lot of confusion with people that I did readings for over there. They kept on saying, "Is this going to be a serious reading?" I said,
"Oh, right,
no, serious."
No, it's serious. And yeah, on that note, fellow travelers, we will call it a day. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. The next one, I think we're going to talk about the nature of the soul and consciousness. I think, because I think this is a very natural lead up to maybe how you can think about that, and we'll share some insights that we have on that as well. So look out for that one coming soon. Please subscribe to get notified, hit the bell and all that stuff, and we'll see you on the next video. Take care.
See you. Thanks. Goodbye.